There's a story we tell ourselves about money. That it freed us from the inefficiency of barter, that it enabled civilization to flourish, that it's a neutral tool, merely a medium of exchange with no moral dimension of its own. Welcome to the history of control, where money, power, and history collide, and nothing is ever as simple as it looks. But what if money didn't just change how we trade? What if it fundamentally altered how we think about value, obligation, and each other? What if the invention of money was also the invention of a new kind of human being? The barter myth goes like this. Ancient humans traded chickens for grain, shoes for bread, services for goods. But this was clumsy and inefficient. You needed a double coincidence of wants. The shoemaker needed grain, and the farmer needed shoes, and they both had to meet at exactly the right moment. So humans invented money to solve this problem, and civilization accelerated forward. It's a clean story, logical, compelling. And according to anthropologists, it's almost entirely false. David Graeber's research on debt argues that there's no historical evidence of societies where barter was the main mode of exchange. What actually existed before money wasn't barter, it was something far more complex and far more human. Credit systems built on social obligation. In early agrarian societies, if you needed meat, the butcher gave it to you, not because you had something to trade, but because you were part of the community. Later, when the butcher needed something, someone else would provide it. These were gift economies, intricate webs of debt, reciprocity, and social memory. You didn't owe a specific amount, you owed a relationship. The debt was unquantifiable, moral, not mathematical. I owe you one meant exactly that, one favor, one act of reciprocity, bound by shared humanity. Then, money changed everything. According to Graeber, money emerged when the unquantifiable obligation transformed into the quantifiable notion of owing a specific unit of something. The moment we could say, you owe me 5 silver pieces, we crossed a threshold. Debt became a number. Relationships became transactions. And that shift from moral obligation to mathematical calculation was a revolution in human consciousness itself. Consider what this meant. In a gift economy, your worth was tied to your relationships. You were embedded in a web of mutual dependence. Defaulting on an obligation wasn't just a financial failure, it was a social and moral catastrophe. It meant betraying your community. But with money, debt became impersonal, abstract. You could repay a stranger without ever knowing their name. You could accumulate wealth without reciprocal obligation. And most dangerously, you could begin to see other humans not as fellow community members, but as instruments of profit. The ancient philosophers saw this transformation happening in real time, and they were horrified. Aristotle argued that money was meant to be a medium of exchange, and desiring it as an end in and of itself was unnatural. He called the accumulation of money for its own sake chrematistics, the art of getting wealthy, and condemned it as a perversion of money's true purpose. He believed that money begetting money through interest was unnatural and wrong, since money has no productive use in itself. A farmer grows wheat, a carpenter builds houses, but a moneylender, he makes money reproduce itself, a kind of economic sorcery that creates nothing tangible, nothing real. Plato worried that allowing interest would lead to societal instability. He saw that once people could profit from lending, wealth would concentrate. The rich would get richer not through virtue or labor, but through the mathematics of compound interest. And a society where money replicated itself automatically was a society abandoning the moral foundation of reciprocity. Even the Bible recognized this danger. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Not money itself, but the love of it. The moment we began desiring money as an end rather than a means, we crossed into moral hazard. And yet, we crossed it anyway. Because money was too useful, too powerful, too efficient at scaling human cooperation beyond the limits of face-to-face communities. But the cost was subtle and profound. Money abstracted value. And abstraction creates distance. Distance creates moral disconnection. When you trade with someone in your village, you see their face, you know their children, you understand the consequences of cheating them. But when money becomes the mediator, that visceral accountability dissolves. A medieval moneylender could charge crushing interest rates to strangers in distant cities without ever confronting the human cost. A modern hedge fund manager can bet against entire economies, destroying livelihoods for millions without meeting a single person affected by his trades. The moral philosopher sees this as a feature, not a bug. Money allows us to cooperate at scale by removing the friction of personal relationships, but it also removes the friction of conscience. And this brings us to the final stage of money's moral evolution, speculation. Once money became abstract enough, once it detached fully from real goods, real labor, real human needs, it could become pure symbol, numbers on a screen, derivatives of derivatives, bets on bets on bets. The 2008 financial crisis revealed how speculation created unprecedented moral hazard. Financial institutions took enormous risks because they knew governments would bail them out if they failed. Asset managers gambled with other people's money, reaping bonuses for short-term gains, while taxpayers absorbed the long-term losses. The credit default swap market reached $60 trillion in notional value by the end of 2007, more than the GDP of the entire planet. People were betting on the failure of mortgages they didn't even own, issued to homeowners they'd never met, packaged into securities whose contents were deliberately obscured. This wasn't just financial innovation, this was the final divorce of money from morality. Aristotle's nightmare had come true. Money was now begetting money in a self-referential loop, completely detached from human welfare. The system rewarded those who could manipulate symbols most cleverly, regardless of whether their actions produced anything of value or destroyed entire economies. Economist Mark Zandi described this as a root cause. The risks inherent in mortgage lending became so widely dispersed that no one was forced to worry about the quality of any single loan. When responsibility is infinitely distributed, it ceases to exist. And when that happened, we discovered we'd built a financial system where doing the right thing was structurally punished and doing the wrong thing was structurally rewarded. Morality became a competitive disadvantage. So where does this leave us? Money began as a solution to a problem that may not have existed. It promised efficiency and got us abstraction. It enabled unprecedented human cooperation and unprecedented human exploitation. It created wealth beyond imagination and inequality beyond measure. The question isn't whether money is good or evil. Money's a tool, as morally neutral as a hammer. The question is what it does to us, how it changes our consciousness, what kind of people we become when we replace relationships with transactions, obligations with calculations, and humans with numbers on a balance sheet. Ancient Mesopotamian and Egyptian economies operated for millennia using elaborate credit systems without monetary transactions. They understood something we've forgotten, that debt is fundamentally a social relationship, not a mathematical one. Every time we reduce a human interaction to a dollar amount, we lose something. A piece of our capacity for empathy, a fragment of our sense of mutual obligation, a bit of the moral intuition that once made us capable of seeing strangers as neighbors. The ancient philosophers were right to be afraid. Money didn't just change how we exchange goods, it changed what we value, how we think, and who we're willing to become to acquire it. And the tragic irony is this: we created money to serve us, but somewhere along the way, we started serving it instead. The real question isn't whether we can go back. Can't. The question is whether we can move forward, build systems that scale human cooperation without sacrificing human decency, create wealth without abandoning reciprocity, measure value without forgetting that some things can't be measured, or whether we'll continue down this path until we've turned everything, every relationship, every obligation, every human bond, into just another transaction to be optimized and exploited. History doesn't repeat, but if you don't understand it, you'll keep making the same trade without realizing what you're giving up. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers. I'll show you.